Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is about a very special kind of wisdom. Today's show is entitled Emotional Wisdom.
This is a fascinating topic, emotional wisdom or emotional intelligence. Sometimes it's even referred to now as just EQ, as if it's a kind of a companion to IQ. That's what we're going to explore in today's program. It's funny to me when I get pushback from people who are not familiar with the field. It's only about 15, 20 years old. They say, emotional intelligence? How could that be? Emotional wisdom? My goodness. It's just the opposite for me. When I get emotionally worked up, I get less intelligent. I say things that I regret. I sometimes do things I wish I hadn't done. And now you're telling me that my emotions can really be intelligent? What's the deal?
You know, there is a sort of a management process that has to go on with the intelligence, to any kind of intelligence, including emotions, to make them wise. That we have emotional experiences that are not good nor bad. They're just what they are. We're angry, we're sad, we're happy. But learning how to both process that experience, both what perspective to take on it, what attitude to have about it, and choosing how to choose your response to that emotion, therein lies the wisdom. The wisdom isn't in having the emotions. We all have the emotions. It's what we do with them when we have them. Do they run us? Do we run them? Do emotions give us suggestions for our behavior, or do they mandate behavior? Wisdom comes when we can step back from the emotion, experience it, learn from it, and choose how to behave with it.
Yeah, that's very well said. So essentially what most people call their emotional nature is really an out-of-control, often over-the-top, runaway emotional nature. But that's what they're referring to.
Right. The normal day-to-day feelings they have, they don't call emotional. Emotional is when they get super angry or super sad or super frustrated. That's what they call emotional.
And interestingly, those big negative emotions like anger or hatred or vengeance or contempt are usually the result of ignoring the feelings when they're still just this subtle, vague hurt or this gnawing inside. That's an interesting feeling that goes with, well, let me say it this way. There's an interesting feeling that goes with refusing to feel. It's paradoxical to say that numbness hurts, but to be emotionally numb does have a kind of an ache that goes with it, a kind of a gnawing inside, as if this is not a natural condition to ignore or deny emotional feelings, even if they are subtle. It just leads to like an internal festering, and the pressure builds, and now you've got a big, difficult to manage emotion. So I guess part of this whole idea of emotional management is to nip it in the bud.
Yeah, not only is when you are like totally repressing all your emotions like bad for you, it's really bad for everybody in your world as well. You know, I remember a time when I was overly emotional, really defensive with my wife, and then I decided I needed to shut that down because I was hurting our relationship, so I decided to become only logical, and shut off my emotions, and there's a lot of cruelty to not having any empathy, to not having any compassion, to not having any emotional connection to the person, especially if it's a person you really love. Because when you shut off your emotions, you shut off your love, you shut off your joy and all the other stuff that they feed off of and give back to you. So there's a lot of hurt that comes from trying to not feel hurt. There's a lot of pain that comes from avoiding pain. It's not something that you can just say, I don't want to have anymore. It manifests in other ways. You push it down, and, the only way out is through. I mean, you can't just pretend it didn't exist. Every emotion you bottle up stays inside of you until you find a way to work through it and release it. So it's not as if we can avoid emotions. What we can do is learn to live with them, manage them day to day so that they don't build up, or we can let them build up and then they will manifest in some horrible things. Dis-ease, for one, really bad temper, really explosive personalities, really high maintenance, difficult people to live with because they just don't know who they really are.
For years now, decades now, you and I have both taught in our own ways the concept that What people argue about, what upsets them, is not what it appears to be. That usually the emotions are symptomatic of something deeper that's really going on. And that can be sort of complex, but one of the big parts of it, indisputably, is just the nature of defensiveness. And to understand defensiveness is to understand a big piece of emotional intelligence and the emotional wisdom that comes from, hey, who are you defending? Because the self you find in paradise doesn't need to be defended. It's not even interested in playing the game. It's not like it knows the answer. It just thinks the question, who am I, is sort of an irrelevant question. Because the real higher self isn't a role player. It isn't a character. It's pure goodness and qualities of love like kindness and gentleness and forgiveness and tolerance and patience. That's who each of us really are at our best. But what gets in the way? What are we defending when we're so defensive? Well, it's the persona. It's the egoic nature, if you will. It's the part of us that identifies with the separated self and sees everything as either with us or against us. But you see, the thing about defensiveness that needs to be understood is that your defensiveness often will take the place of an attack on the person you're defending yourself from. It's sort of like nuclear war. There really is no defense. If somebody wants to hurt you with insulting, hurtful words, what kind of shield could you put up, Put your fingers in your ears and go, la, 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 la. You're going to hear it and it's going to hurt. So what people do to hurt back, ultimately, they're just trying to defend themselves, but what they do is attack. And so what feels like I'm just defending myself really becomes offensive. And both people, under the impression this is just a rhetorical self-defense kind of a situation, actually are being very aggressive. And this is where the emotions build. They get even more complicated. We project and blame our emotions on other people. But think of it this way. You think you're defending yourself. You're really attacking the other person. They're mirroring that behavior. They're doing exactly the same thing from 180 degrees apart. But if you're defending yourself, you're defending your right to be hurt. Why would you do that? Why do we argue for our right to be so hurtable, to be so vulnerable? Why do we demand that this is my pain, you caused it, but it's mine now, and I'm going to carry this grudge. I'm not going to forgive you. I'm going to do everything I can to continue hurting. To what? Set you straight? Teach you some sort of lesson? What is this holding a grudge? What is this refusal to take responsibility for how we feel? And what is it that fuels the argument? All of it is rooted in, I think I'm being defensive, and in fact, who are you defending, and why does it need defending?
Yeah, it's just a manifestation of fear, and obviously that comes from the ego part that lives to be afraid. It literally lives to be afraid. Its job is to be afraid. If it wasn't afraid of anything, it wouldn't have to be around anymore. So its very survival depends on finding ways to be afraid. It's that rustling in the bushes. Is it the wind or is it a lion? Well, our ancestors couldn't take the chance that it might be the lion, and even though it was usually the wind, they had to be afraid. Well, so we have inherent in us this paranoia, and if anytime we get into this danger mode, this fear mode, we move into fight or flight. And look, I mean, there's fight and there's flight. And if you're not running away, the only thing you can do left is to fight. There's no, disagreeing, or there's no reconciliation. There's no arbitration. There's no, trying to figure out a compromise. It's all running away from the whole thing or attacking back. And again, the person who you're being defensive with probably, or quite possibly, wasn't even attacking you in the first place, but now you're attacking back. And of course, they're going to attack. That's because this ego part is so afraid of letting go of who it thinks it is. It thinks it's nice, and it's being told it's not nice, or it's being told it's unkind, and it thinks it's kind. And it needs to hold on to the fact that it thinks it's kind. It needs to be kind, because if it's not kind, it doesn't know what it's going to be. And if it doesn't know what it's going to be, it's terrified. it's all about really not knowing who we are. And our ego needs to hold on to, on a 1 to 10, I'm a 7 nice, and you can't talk me into thinking I'm a 5 nice, because then I don't know who I really am. The ego needs to hold on to who it is. And once we can step back and see from a higher self, well, you know what? Sometimes I'm a 5 nice, and sometimes I'm a 7 nice. Sometimes I see myself from this way, and other people see me from that way. And it's not about, as you were saying right at the beginning, Michael, it's not about the subject we were talking about at all. We're not arguing about the furniture. We're not arguing about the missed date. We're arguing about the fact that I hurt because you're attacking me. I feel like you're attacking me and trying to make me believe I'm not who I believe I am.
Right. And the way to stop this, the magic bullet, is very simple. You acknowledge the partner's hurt. Now, I said it was simple. I did not say it was easy. Because in order to do that, you have to be willing to put down, even for just a few moments, your whole agenda, right? Your side in this tug of war. You have to put that down long enough to listen to your partner and play it back and say, I mean, that's all they're looking for. We think we want to win the argument. All we want is some understanding. Couldn't you just say you understand how I feel? And if you can, and if you're willing to do that, magical things happen. The person that you say it to realizes that's all they wanted, was for you to say, well, I can understand how you'd feel that way. In fact, at that time, it's likely they realize that they really don't need you to agree, don't really care if you agree. They just wanted your understanding. That's what it was all about. This is a missing piece in emotional wisdom, emotional intelligence, especially these kinds of social relationships, husband, wife, spouse, partners, people at work. It's, again, simple. It's called reflective communication. We call it the heart talk. It's just not easy to do.
No, but it's very, very essential that people not only get the understanding. Sometimes they also want the agreement, but they always want the understanding with the agreement, because the agreement without understanding is like, yeah. It's like there's no real understanding, there's no real agreement. You're just like placating them. So we always want the understanding. Whether or not we need the agreement, we always need the understanding, and that's really the key. So real emotional wisdom comes from giving people the feedback that you get them. That even if you disagree with them, you're honoring their space to feel the way they feel. You're understanding to the best of your ability what it is they're saying to you. That even if you refute the facts, even if you disagree with what they're saying, you honor their right to say it, and you're hearing them, and you're listening to them, and understanding them. Sometimes that's all you can give them, because they're just damn wrong, with what they're saying, and you can't agree with them, but you can at least say, hey, I hear you, I get this is what you're saying.
Language, of course, is one of the primary ways that we program ourselves and program each other. And, the foibles and the challenges of communicating verbally with language create some funny situations and stories. You might think, for example, you're taking responsibility for your feelings when you're continuing to blame defensively another person for your feeling. Remember, emotions are evoked from us. It's not that complicated. There's a stimulus that causes the emotion to be evoked.
Sometimes imaginary, sometimes real.
And yet, what comes up is from you. It's evoked from you, not done to you. So to play victim of an emotion is to miss the whole point. So when we instruct people in better ways of communication, part of emotional intelligence or emotional wisdom, we're calling it in today's program, part of this reflective communication is walking people through these situations. I remember a couple I worked with years ago sitting at the opposite ends of this big sofa I had at the time in my office, this really long sofa, and they were as far away as they could get with all the pillows piled between them. And at one point in the session, I said to the wife, to the woman, say to your husband how you feel, express that. And she did a real good job. She said, well, I'm angry, but I'm also confused. I'm feeling, sort of lonely, I guess, really abandoned and alienated, and I'm sad, and I'm frankly rather depressed, and I feel And she went on, right? And then I had the husband reflect that. Now, whether you agree or not, we're talking about her feelings. Can't hardly argue with someone's feelings, so play that back. And he did, and she felt heard and understood. It was a big step forward. But then when it came to be the man's turn, and I said, now tell your wife how you feel, he turned and looked at her and said, I feel you're a bitch. And started talking about her, and I said, no, hold on. That's not a feeling. He said, what do you mean? Well, you're a bitch. That's not a feeling. Your wife just told you the names of feelings. I feel, and then each word was a feeling. You're a bitch is not a feeling. He said, that's how I feel. I said, no, that's what you think. That's a judgment that you're making. And so a lot of us, especially men, I think, because of the way we're socialized as little boys, right? Feelings are bad. Feelings are a weakness. So a lot of us, guys especially, many women too, just don't have the savvy. We don't have the language. We don't have the ability or the desire to take ownership of these feelings and then tell them. I mean, the great thing about expressing your feelings in an argument is that nobody can argue with the way you feel. It's ridiculous. They'll always be able to argue with your thoughts. But your thoughts could be right, your thoughts could be wrong. Your feelings are your feelings, and unless you're lying, in which case there's really not much of a relationship here to work with. But if you're telling the truth about how you feel, even if you don't understand those feelings, the other person doesn't need to understand them to be understanding about the fact that you're telling the truth. This is the way you feel. I can't really argue with the way. Sometimes people will say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way.
Or stop feeling that right away, right now. Stop feeling it. Stop feeling it.
Anybody ever said that to you?
Yeah.
Stop feeling that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you're wrong to feel
That's
that
right.
way? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember one time I told somebody that I was embarrassed. They said, oh, stop feeling that. You shouldn't be embarrassed by that. Everybody, But wait a minute, but I was embarrassed by it. I felt, my face flushed red, and
by something this other person did.
No, something I did. And I was telling them about it, and they said, "Well, you shouldn't feel that because other people do that all the time, and they don't feel embarrassed, so you shouldn't feel the feelings you're feeling."
Yeah, that's the Dr. Phil approach to psychotherapy.
Well, just stop doing it.
The rubber chicken. You just stop doing it.
It hurts when I do that. Well, then don't do that. Well, it's easier said than undone. We form habits, and the problem of trying to help other people by having them not feel bad. Telling them to not feel bad doesn't make people feel good. Telling them to get through the bad feelings. You can help people work through their bad feelings. You can help people work through the difficult emotions. But telling them to not have them or stop feeling them is not the answer. If somebody's experiencing anger, then you can serve them by, just as is true in the entire animal kingdom, by not showing any fear. Because when an animal comes upon something and it's angry, and then the person's afraid, it gets angrier and angrier. But if you hold yourself, without fear, fearlessly, courageously, then the person's anger dissipates. Or if they're really, really sad, and lonely, then you can get them in the energy of helping other people, and all of a sudden they become less important, and you help them work through their sadness by helping others, by reaching out and helping others. And if they're feeling negative and just really, disgruntled about everything and frustrated about everything and pessimistic about everything, well, you can find a way to agree with some of their feelings, like feed back to them some truth to what they're saying, and then say, and, that's true, and, along with that pessimism, there's some room for some cautious optimism, because, stuff might go right, it's certainly possible. So there's ways of helping people work through the feelings they have, but it's never about telling them not to feel them or quit feeling that feeling.
Another aspect of emotional intelligence that causes so many problems, we see it over and over again in our private practices, the desire of people to want to protect others from their negative feelings. In other words, well, I can't tell the truth to this person because it would hurt their feelings. And so I'm going to participate in this veiled deception because I don't want them to feel sad or bad. Well, I understand the intention. It's misguided, For a number of reasons, the person deserves the truth. You could perhaps offer it up in a real kind, understanding, and diplomatic way. But the value of truth over any kind of deception, I mean, philosophically, we ought to be pretty dedicated to that by this time in our lives. You're an adult now. You understand truth is an important thing.
I mean, if only for like helping them in course correction. If you're deceiving them and feeding them bad information, and they use that as feedback, and then they continue to go off in that direction because you've encouraged them to do so, it hurts people when you lie to them.
Yeah, I think it works contrary to the whole universe. Telling a lie is physiologically stressful in our bodies. It degrades our health. It confuses us. It has a negative impact on our emotional nature. So if lying causes stress and degrades our body, promotes disease, then obviously we're built to tell the truth. The benefits of telling the truth are seen there. And I also like that Shakespeare line about foul deeds shall rise, though all the earth o'erwhelm them to men's eyes. In spite of appearances, lies eventually reveal themselves. The truth seems to be like life itself. It has a longing to be born, and it may go through cycles, of course, of birth and death, like trees and plants in the autumn, and the leaves dry up and wither away and melt back into the earth. But they're in the springtime, they're ready to rock and roll again. And I think the truth is like that. It has this, or like the flower that reaches for the sun, it has this longing to be. And the universe honors truth. So if we can be truthful in our emotions then, and if we can allow other people to have access to their feelings, then I think we're less likely to bury ours. Or to say it the other way around, as we work with our emotional nature and honor the truth and the value that our emotions have in showing us who we really are, then we're more likely to allow other people to have their feelings, good, bad, or otherwise. Like, who says a bad feeling's really bad? A bad feeling could teach you a lot. I don't really want the bad gauges on the dashboard of my car to indicate a problem, but they're really not bad gauges. They're good gauges. They want to give me a little forewarning so I can take care of the matter before it gets too bad. So it doesn't benefit me, and I'm really not helping my friends if I try to protect them from the way they feel from this information.
Yeah, there are no bad emotions, but, there are bad ways of dealing with them. The great Paul Simon line, just give me some tenderness beneath your honesty. I mean, honesty can be really hard-edged and cruel and mean and cutting and hurtful, but it can also be delivered gently. And you can say that virtually about any emotion, helping people who are sad. Now, people can do sad very elegantly. You can be very sad, open your heart, share everything that's really, deep and hurtful, and be really, really sad, and somebody can help you with that, and you can work through your sadness. Or you can take that sadness and turn it inward and become depressed and alone and reclusive and just really eat yourself up and get sick. I mean, you can take sadness and do something very healthy with it. You can take sadness and do something very unhealthy with it. Same with anger. I mean, anger could be something that causes you to just punch somebody out, just be violent for no real reason. But anger also could be what causes you to be righteously indignant about things that are wrong in the world. And we need that kind of anger against things like slavery, against things like Nazis. I mean, it's good to be angry that bad things happen so that those bad things could never happen again. There's no bad emotion, but there are elegant and wiser ways of dealing with our emotions, and there are also inelegant and much less mature ways of dealing with emotions as well. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about emotional wisdom. It doesn't mean don't be sad or don't be frustrated or don't be angry or, it doesn't even mean don't be jealous or hurtful. What it means is as you experience those emotions, do so truthfully, work through them. As George Harrison said, it's so far out, the way out is in. You go in, you experience them, you work through them, and you come out wiser on the other end.
It's also important to remember that you have the option, when you're emotionally worked up, of delaying any action, any speech or behavior that reveals this strong emotional hit you've just taken. In other words, if you're not sure what to say or you're not sure what to do, consider that you always have the option to say or do nothing.
Does it improve upon the silence?
That's a wonderful. Yeah.
That's a great phrase.
One of our favorite phrases. Ancient concept. But of course it takes an intention. It takes some practice even to remember, hey, I've got choices, one of which is, hold on, don't say or do anything just yet. Sit down, breathe, don't say it, hold your tongue. If you really mean it, you can say it later.
Thomas Jefferson said, count to 10. If that doesn't work, count to 100.
Yeah, do it again. We like to say count backwards if you're going to count 10 to 1, actually, and go slower and slower and slower, breathing slower.
That definitely works.
Yeah, that really, really works. The breath is the secret there, and the idea of dilating time, slowing things down. You say, oh, if only I had that presence of mind when people push my buttons. Well, you have to practice in front. You don't wait till it happens to say, oh, yeah, this is the time I need to get conscious. It's like any sport where you practice in advance of the game. And so here again, the guided imagery, the visualization exercise, we do one of these in every single program in this series for this reason. It's a way you can learn a new behavior with far fewer repetitions, practice sessions, than it would normally take. You learn it more completely and with a stronger emotional impact and a greater likelihood that it'll really work. You'll really remember next time, hey, I've got this choice. I could slow down, hold on. Sometimes, I tell you, it saved me a couple of times when I just wasn't sure. I almost said something, you know what I'm talking about, or almost did something that I know I would have regretted later. I felt justified in the moment, but as soon as 5 minutes later, I was thankful that I didn't say or do anything, as I wasn't ready. I hadn't processed these emotional feelings, right? So again, when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're not talking about intelligence found in just any disturbing emotion. We're talking about a process. It's like you have to cook certain grains to make them nutritionally available. You got to roll an oat or crack it or bust it open or chop it with a blade or something and then boil it to make it available to you. And emotions in some ways are like that too. They need to be processed. They need to be explored and felt through completely all the way to the edge of the feeling. And then they reveal themselves to you. So first is the awareness that you have the choice. And second, the breath and the management. Okay, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to, in fact, close my eyes and do a meditation here and really pull it together. Oh, I can't do that. I'm in a social situation. That's okay. I can still breathe and relax and make a mental note to explore this in a deeper meditation later when I have an opportunity. To practice that is to have it more available when you really need it.
It's really easy, actually, to define the places inside of you that need healing, because if somebody says something to you and it hurts you, you just found one. You know, if something you says hurts me, there's something in me that needs to be healed, and that's where I need to go. So think back to the conversations you've had, most likely with the people you love the most, because they're the ones that have the best awareness of your buttons, and be aware that conversations that you have with this particular person about this particular subject often make you feel angry or upset or defensive, and prepare for that situation to arise again. That person's going to come up and push that button again, but this time, the first thing that happens is you have awareness. You go, oh, wait a minute. I have a choice here. I can do what I did last time, or I can do something different this time. I can manage my emotions this time instead. And so I'm not going to get upset and angry because here comes big sister again telling me I need to get a job, or here comes mom again telling me my room's not clean, or here comes my husband again telling me that, whatever. I don't have to get angry, upset, frustrated when that happens next time. Next time I can see where, you know what? there's a little bit of truth to what they're saying, or else I would have been able to just shove it off completely. And I want to take a look at what's hurting inside of me so that I can heal it a little bit. How do you heal it? Well, you forgive yourself for it. You go there, you see it, you acknowledge it. You don't pretend it doesn't exist. You acknowledge its existence. You breathe so that you feel safe having it, so that it's an okay thing, and it loses its power to hurt you, and it fades and becomes a memory that's purely intellectual without a whole lot of emotional entanglements anymore. You remember that you did that. You remember that you felt that way. But now you understand, you've forgiven yourself. You don't need to feel that way anymore. You don't need to feel embarrassed about that time you got caught in the boys' locker room when you were 7 anymore. It happened a long time ago. So now you can let it go just like anything else, heal it, experience it, remember it, but no longer be emotionally affected by it. You know what's coming up in your life with the people you care about the most, the kind of situations that cause you to have the most stress. Well, prepare ahead of time for those situations. And next time, instead of just knee-jerk reacting, next time, remember the awareness, I have choices. Program your mind to see the experience, I have choices, and choose to breathe instead of just react.
One of my favorite quotable quotations along these lines is Eleanor Roosevelt's. She wrote, I think in one of her books or perhaps her newspaper column, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Wow. Nobody can hurt you emotionally without your permission, she's saying. I think part of the reason we're confused about this is the ego tries to find its self-worth in being better than or inferior to other people. It tries to find its relative position in a kind of a hierarchy. That's just the way the ego thinks. It's binary. It's that you or me, true or false, everything or nothing, no middle ground, right? Just this either-or kind of thinking. Ego tends to do that. And as it gets stressed, it's even less likely to find a third way or a fourth option. The higher self that you find in paradise doesn't see it that way, however. The higher self doesn't see better or worse, inferior or superior, just different from. It's like, instead of a vertical hierarchy, it's a lateral difference. It's like we're all equal in the eyes of God. We're all supposed to be equal before the law, right? People say it all the time. But we're obviously not equal. We're all different. We're uniquely different. We're wonderfully unique and diverse, all of us with particular talents and gifts and abilities that nobody has in exactly that same combination. We've got the fingerprint evidence. Now we've got the DNA proof of individuality. Imagine the universe, this one thing that expresses itself in unique and diverse ways. There's magic and wonder in that. And the higher self realizes that. You can realize that. You can give up this idea that the ego has, that you're either better than or worse than, and just accept yourself as this unique individual. You're one of a kind, just like everybody else.
I mean, it makes perfect sense that the ego would behave that way. The higher self knows that different is fine, no problem, but the ego is afraid because, you see, it's us or them. And so if it's not us, if they're different, then it's got to be them. So these are us's, but I'm better than these us's of us, and I'm worse than these us's of us. But we're all us. It's like I'm superior to these us's, and I'm inferior to those us's, but we're all us's. They can't be different than the us's, or they're the enemy. So the higher self has evolved way beyond the need for there to be us and them. It realizes it's all us. It's all us. It's just us. It's justice. And so it doesn't have that need to be higher than or lower than or better than or worse than. It can just be unique and special and different than. And a lot of our emotions are exactly an expression of that. I mean, you may think like other people. There are other people who have similar thoughts going through their mind all the time than you have, but nobody experiences the world emotionally the way you do. Nobody has the same amount of fear plus anger plus hatred plus joy plus all that's going on. Nobody emotionally matches you, even close. So to understand other people feel different than we do and give them space to be different than we are, the same experience, the same insult causes one person to cringe and another person to be devastated, that we aren't all the same emotionally. And in fact, none of us are the same emotionally. We're all absolutely unique.
By the way, one of the pioneers of this field of emotional wisdom, emotional intelligence, the EQ so-called, is Daniel Goleman, who teaches out of Harvard University, and he's written several books now. And he talks about the 4 parts of emotional intelligence, 2 of which we featured in this episode here today. The idea of being self-aware. Wait a minute, I've got choices. I could take a moment, process my feelings, calm them, and then they reveal their wisdom to me.
Calming them doesn't mean dissipating them. It doesn't mean making them go away. It means like with water, if it's all turbulent, you can't see into it. If it's calm, it's the same amount of water, but now it's calm, you can see deeply into it.
And the self-management part, too, then is, now what do I do with this? What am I learning from it? And how do I respond? How do I initiate a productive, life-affirming response instead of that knee-jerk reaction that would have just made things worse, frankly? And so self-awareness and self-management are parts 1 and 2, but Goleman goes on to talk about then empathy and relationship management. I want to mention that because we'll do that in a program a few weeks or a couple of months down the road from now. That's also a part of the larger field of emotional management, emotional intelligence, or the wisdom of using the mind and the emotional nature in an integrated fashion. 25, 30 years ago, I called this integrated thinking. And that's what I was talking about, the way in which the mind manages the emotions so that the emotions can complement what the mind is thinking about with their own wisdom. We have 2 intelligences, and both are important. In many ways, the mental nature corresponds to the so-called left brain, and the emotional nature, the right brain. Or you could talk about the mental nature being the masculine side, and the emotional nature being the feminine side, as in the yin and the yang. There's a number of different models that sort of work, right? You often need many models for something like this, even though it's simple. There's just these 2 parts, but it's how they relate. The nature of the relationship of thought to feeling. Each impacts the other, obviously, and then you got to factor in behavior. I mean, if you just changed your behavior, that would affect the way you think and feel. And so if you change your thoughts, change your mind, we say, that's going to impact the other 2. If you just change the way you feel, that'll affect the way you think and the way you behave. Each affects the other. But the chairman of the board is the mental nature, and its job is to manage the emotions to create the ideal physical results.
And a lot of the wisdom in managing the emotions from the point of view of the intellect is to have them be exactly what they are. And it is to not make them smaller than they are, not to try and diminish them or pretend that they aren't there, and also to not blow them up, to not make mountains out of molehills, to not take something that hurts a little bit and make it sound like it's a huge, terrible thing. A lot of emotional management comes from observing our emotions and experiencing them for exactly what they are, rather than attempting to belittle them or expand them or make them into something else. Once we can see our emotions for what they are, again, it's not like we have less anger when we see our anger from a calm place. We have the same amount of anger as we had a minute ago. We're just not behaving angrily. Now the waters are calm and we can look deeply into them. Whether the emotion's hot, whether it's really, really hot water, or whether the emotions are cold, almost frozen water, if it's calm, you can look down deeply into it. And so whether it's a pain or an anger, whether it's a sadness or a loneliness, whether it's a fear or just a frustration about life, whatever it is, once you experience it, the first step is to become aware that I'm having these feelings. They're not any bigger than they really are. They're not any smaller than they really are. They really are what they really are. And now that I know that, I can go into them, feel them, experience them, breathe into them, take away their power to hurt me. That's how you manage your emotions. You don't make them bigger than they are or littler than they are, and you experience them for what they are. And for whatever they are, that's good, because it's all of those whatever they are that make you whatever you are.
I didn't think you were going to get out of that one, but you did real well. Let's do an alpha process, sure, and we'll demonstrate what we're talking about. Again, you want to practice in advance, right? If you put this off till you actually need it, it'll be too little too late. So Here's a great way to begin to practice managing your feelings and massaging, if you will, the wisdom that's bound up in these symptoms. You can think of emotions as being the colors of thought or the symptoms of thought, the feelings that go with the mental nature. And they're not really separate. They go together. But we can learn things from each that the other could not provide. Close your eyes and get comfortable. Sit back in your chair. Allow yourself to feel supported by the back of the chair, by the seat of the chair, or the pillow, the sofa you may be sitting on. Maybe you're cross-legged on the floor. Allow whatever you sit upon to support you. Feel a letting go that acknowledges that you're safe. You're going to be supported by the floor, by the ground, or by this chair, this pillow. And feel that letting go now. Take a nice, slow, deep breath, pulling in strength and power as you inhale. Hold for just a moment, and now as you exhale, feel the letting go again, safe and relaxed.
I'm feeling relaxed and feeling safe and feeling calm and quiet. Allows your entire emotional nature to emerge. No longer hidden, suppressed, underneath anything in the way. Now is the time to safely purge any emotions that no longer serve you. You can simply release. And now, in this place of paradise, of peace, it's easy to do. You just let the emotion come through, you experience it, and feel inner peace. And with that, the emotion does release. So imagine yourself in a situation, some kind of a thing that's going to happen to you where somebody you know, probably love, is in an argument with you, or complaining or pushing your buttons or making you feel emotions that hurt. But now, something different happens. Now you can assert choices. You hear voices reminding you you have choices. Whenever your buttons get pushed, whenever your emotions come to play, whenever you start to feel that negative feeling that way, there's these voices, strong but quiet, but they say you have choices. You can choose to respond in a unique and different way. Say the voices that offer choices. You can choose to respond in a way that you desire, because the voices remind you that you have choices. So your wisdom comes to play every time someone else does say something that makes you irritated or upset or feeling anger or wronged. Comes the voices with the choices, and you choose to be strong and to not react, but to breathe and respond.
In a dynamic like this, your response could be to ask for more time. Your response also could be about the other person. And if you need more time, if you really should be taking more time, you'll know it, because the temptation will be to tell the other person about them, something they're doing, something they've done, something they just did. You're going to teach them a lesson. You're going to set them straight. You're going to explain them to them. But you probably don't need any more time if the response that you have for them begins with the word I and is followed by the word feel, and then followed by the truth about how you feel. In other words, if you can give up in the moment defensiveness, realizing there's really nothing here that needs defending and no reason for you to argue for your right to continue to be hurt, you can ask yourself in the moment, what was their intention? Did they want to hurt me? Do you think that was really their desire to do that? Often we don't even get that far before we blurt out some sentence that begins with you. And you always, and you never, and well, you know how those discussions go. So if you're ready to say, I feel, you don't need more time necessarily. You could take it and explore further the meaning of your emotions. Just sit receptive in a nice quiet state like this and be curious about why you feel the way you feel. Ask yourself about the last time you felt like this. Times in your childhood when you used to feel this way, and what can you learn about yourself from these emotions? This is what sets us free. Again, the feelings are evoked from us. Ultimately, they're about us. The person that we've always blamed for making us feel this way, they just stimulated the feelings. They were a trigger, but the emotion itself that's released is ours. Imagine knowing that, realizing that, remembering that you could take the time to sit quietly, patiently, receptive to that kind of self-awareness, and then to have something to share that begins with I feel. And I'm beginning to understand that in these situations, the reason that I feel this way is, and I'm understanding myself better. And I wanted you to know that that's what I experienced a few minutes ago, or a few hours ago, or a day or two ago. This is how you resolve those kinds of hurtful disagreements and disputes. Where we think we want to win an argument, you now understand all you really wanted was a little bit of acknowledgement, and maybe the best way to get that is to give a little bit of acknowledgement. And therein lies emotional wisdom.
So, if you're feeling apprehensive and fear you might just become defensive, remember there are choices that exist. You can choose to do nothing or something quite different. There's so many choices, not to be missed. Take an extra moment and explore. There's this choice and that choice, and yes, there's even more. Lots of choices, lots of options, lots of different ways to be. But if you're feeling apprehensive and you fear you might be defensive, any other choice will set you free. Because defensive is about the worst choice you can be. There's nothing to defend, so simply comprehend that defensive is just a fear that isn't real. And with one deep breath and the voices about choices, you allow that defensiveness to heal. So when you're feeling apprehensive, no need to become defensive. Instead, one deep breath and you're on your way to living life more wise. It'll open up your eyes when you learn to live life emotionally wiser this way.
In a moment, I'll ask you to open your eyes wide awake and alert with a full memory of this experience so you can practice it and rehearse these outcomes, these goals. Reorient yourself by thinking about the room in which you sit and what you'll see in a moment when you finally open your eyes. Then take a nice, slow, deep breath, ideally through the nose. Fill your lungs with strength and power. Hold as you peak just for a moment, and then exhale, relaxing, and open your eyes now. Wide awake, alert, rested, feeling really good, better than before, and I bet a lot more calm.
There's something very, very different about telling you stuff and then guiding you into this alpha state and programming your mind with it, so to speak. Of course, the programs are always to be submitted for your approval, and it's you agreeing with the programming that makes it empowered. But remember, when your eyes are closed and when you're feeling safe and when you're living in this paradise place that you've created inside, there's a huge, powerful state of hypersuggestibility that goes along with this. And as you program your mind, as you visualize, as you imagine, 88% of your mind, the subconscious, really believes it's happening. And not only is it happening, but it's happening as the most important thing in the world that's happening right now. It's got incredible emotional impact. And so by imagining it over and over again, X number of repetitions at Y emotional amplitude, you can create a habit. You can create a habit of behaving non-defensively in the future. You can create a habit right now of responding in a much more loving way when you feel attacked than you ever have before.
You know, we're just about to start our 4th year of producing this series, Finding Yourself in Paradise. So we're ready to do something we've been planning to do all along now, and that's the Paradise Retreat. We're going to give this breath. We're going to bring this to life. For those of you who are willing to get on an airplane and fly over here in February of 2011, the 5-day Paradise Retreat. Finding yourself in paradise. It's about immersing yourself in nature and taking the incredible quality of peace that begins to happen, well, for most people, about the morning of day 3, when the jingle-jangle of media and internet and television finally falls away, and you're present in paradise. About the morning of day 3, you're going to be a different person.
It might be day 2 or 1, but don't brag.
It depends on the individual. It might be day 4. My experience is, for most people,
right around day 3, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're going to wake up. You see, the peace leads to expanded awareness, and it's the expanded awareness that'll help you understand yourself. That fixes a lot of problems that really are not problems. You just thought they were problems because your brain was full of roof brain chatter. You had 8 or 10 ideas chattering at the same time, competing for your attention. Plus, we're addicted to multitasking. Plus, you probably live in a big city. It's all too much. You're overstimulated. The Maui Retreat in February of 2011 will expose you to a quality of peace and awareness that you can remember, anchor into, and take home to the mainland with you, so that for the rest of your life, anytime you've got 60 seconds, or maybe 2 or even 3 minutes, to change the way you're thinking and change the way you're feeling and maybe even change the way you're behaving for the better on demand right now, you'll have the tools, the techniques, and the experience to close your eyes and quickly come here. Even if you're in a social situation where you couldn't possibly close your eyes, you'll have a technique to look away, focus, and return immediately to the state of mind that you remembered from this paradise experience. February 13th through the 18th, into the 19th for some folks, 5 days, going into 6 days, on 70 privately owned acres in the remote northeastern shoreline of beautiful Maui, Hawaii. Visit focusedpassion.com. If you have questions, you can email us at info@focusedpassion.com or call the contributor support line anytime, 24/7, at 818-973-3154. Leave a message, I'll call you back, 818-973-3154.
I still do quite a bit of traveling, and I leave Maui quite frequently, but Maui never leaves me. And I think it's a wonderful experience to always have some Maui inside of you. You'll leave the Maui Paradise Retreat happily Maui'd forever.
Maui no Ka'oi, as the locals say, there is none better. As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.